This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm here with New Brunswick. How are you today, sir?
Pretty well, now that the event's over, and I think everyone was happy.
Oh, it was fantastic. Now, we're here today to speak about oysters, but focusing in upon the kind of genetic side of oysters and the kind of groundbreaking work that you're doing here. Please tell us a little more about that.
Well, for a species that's had some sort of interaction with humans for so long, for thousands of years, we know surprisingly little about oysters in their natural state. Oysters change sex from male to female, but we don't know why, or we don't know how exactly. Within our own region in New Brunswick, we have different populations in different bays, and we don't really know how different they are in terms of how they grow, or what they taste like, or what genes make them taste like what they are. And so what we're doing is we're really doing some of the some pioneering work trying to answer those questions. So what we're going to be doing is sampling wild oysters from throughout the eastern coast of New Brunswick and bringing them all to our hatchery, taking DNA samples from all of them, and then we're going to be breeding them both within each population and then across between all sort of pairwise comparisons, and seeing, well, what genes are associated with what traits. Does an oyster with this gene grow faster than this one? Does it taste better? Does it have a deeper cup or a better shape?
And which of these traits are most desirable for you at Mallet?
Well, it's always an interesting. Whenever you get into a selection program, there's always that question of which traits, and there's really two types of traits that are important. One is traits that benefit oyster producers, so things that would increase the profitability of an oyster growing company. So that the biggest one there would be growth rate. We're at the northern range limit for oysters, and so they grow a lot slower here than they do further south. So that's a big constraint on our production. But then obviously there's all the sort of consumer benefit traits, like shell shape, the amount of meat, the taste, and we're really going to see if it's possible to sort of have our cake and eat it too, and have both an oyster that is more sustainable in terms of its production, but also is just a better product, which ultimately that's the most important thing.
Now, just to get things straight here, we're not talking about genetic manipulation here. We're talking about old school and basically a selection process through basically the evolutionary process, but simply accelerating that somewhat with a little bit of man-made help.
Or even compensating for previous damages, because wild oyster populations, especially in New Brunswick, well, almost throughout the range, eastern oysters have been already incredibly impacted by human factors. So one big problem here, about 40 or 50 years ago, we had something called the Mallet disease, which is thought to have been brought in from the introduction of Pacific oysters to the East Coast, and that disease wiped out something like 80 or 90% of the natural populations that existed here.
How long would that have been? How long ago?
So that was about 40 or 50 years ago.
Right.
And we don't really know what happened to the oysters since then in terms of their genetic diversity. Maybe they had probably quite a large bottleneck, and so they could be sort of have these sort of genetic problems like inbreeding, and so if we can get a handle on that and maybe design a breeding program that can restore some of that lost genetic variation, then we may actually be able to reverse some of the damage that we may have done already. So it's not a sort of genetic manipulation in that sort of scary sense. We have a very much an ecology and natural evolution mindset going into this, where we're really trying to see first what's out there in nature, and if we can lend a hand, and if we can do that while helping ourselves too.
Well, Martin, thank you very much for giving us an insight into your work up here. We look forward to tasting many of your oysters in the future, and hopefully we'll see you in Toronto soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.